Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Creators Connect series. My name is Luca, but you can call me that camera guy. If you're returning subscribe, thank you so much for your love and support. I truly appreciate it. If you are new here, please do consider subscribing if you like this video. Now, in today's episode of the show, we're joined by a man of many talents. His name is Nawfel Djari, and he's based out of Ottawa in Canada. Amongst many other things, Nawfel is a composer, a conductor, he plays the violin, and dabbles in painting and poetry. Nawfel is actually very, very good friends with an individual I had on the show last year in the first season. His name is Angelo Leo, and he plays the saxophone. If you haven't watched that two-part series, please do check it out. I'll leave it linked up top. But it's just super cool to see that speaking to one person leads me to speaking to another person, which leads me speaking to so many other people. And that process continues to repeat itself and exposing so many talented creators that I'm privileged and honored to sit down and chat with. My conversation with Nawfel is no exception to that. It's absolutely amazing. It's a beautiful chat, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Unfortunately, we weren't able to record it visually, but we do have an audio for you guys to listen to. So just sit back, relax, and let's connect with Nawfel. Thank you so much for joining and being here. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate you reaching out as well, coming through and sending me a message and just like encouraging me really, and just because it's really hard to have this thing going on and not really know if people are seeing it and enjoying it and are being impacted by it. So receiving a message from you was really encouraging, and I thank you for that. I'm really honored to have you on here. And it was really difficult. I will say it was really difficult building a set of questions for this interview. I went through your Instagram, I went through your YouTube, and I didn't see anything that you do not do creatively. It was absolutely amazing. I'm like, this guy literally does everything. So it was really difficult to take the questions and only have 10. Like it was almost impossible to only pick a set of 10 questions to have a 30-minute conversation with you, because you're filled with so much knowledge and experience in different things, which is absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
But my first question would be based on that. I mean, you play the bass, play the piano, drums, viola, you had a podcast, you're a composer, studio engineer, painting. I mean, it's a lot that you do. And out of everything that you do, what has your heart the most and why?
That's a really hard question to answer.
I knew it would be. I knew it would be.
But if I'll just be frank with myself. Like, music has been my main source of emotional expression and sense of being and self-reflection all my life. Right? Like, my mom's a pianist. I was, although I started music quite late at the age of 13, it really did embody like every single part of my being. And so, sure, I do this poetry and studio and composing and all this other stuff, but really at the end of the day, music was the main thing that, got me through my life and all that other stuff. Now, just with that being said, music isn't just, a very simple thing. It's quite versatile and quite
it's far
complex.
from
So,
simple.
with just music, people say like, oh yeah, you're just a musician. Yeah, well, you can play jazz, you can play classical, you can play atonal, you can play improvisatory, you can do so many things, right? Country, folk, bluegrass, whatever. And that's why I've always felt like I was a kid in a candy store.
Wow.
Because there's so many different ways of expressing and so many different types of music that you can go through. So as far as in the sense of like everything that I do, what's most important to me, every art form has its own way of expressing, right? Regardless of whether the emotion is there or not. Well, although the emotion will always be there. There's always a way of expressing, like dance, with acting, with whatever. Now, for music, that's always been my thing because that's what I was brought up with, as far as my colleagues, my surroundings. Only recently did I start doing art, and as far as recently, like 2 years ago, I started composing and I started arranging, and I've always been a studio engineer and poet and all this other stuff. But music has always had a fundamental principal value to me, if I to express it that way.
Wow. And I mean, it's very prevalent. It's very easy to see through the work that you share on your social media that you're so much into music. And
Thank
I've
you.
got a bunch of questions on that as well, on music. The next one is on that, and some that will follow. But I noticed that you've played and performed in multiple orchestras. You've played and performed with different people. I think it's the viola that you played in that.
That's right.
How was that experience? I've always seen people performing in orchestras, and I love orchestral music. I'm absolutely in love with it. It's so calming. It's so beautiful to see the way people move. But I've never met anyone who's played in one or conducted one. So I'd like to know, like, how was that experience? I mean, from the rehearsals and meeting with 50, 20, 25, 35 people, sometimes even more, and having to come up with this beautiful piece of art in the end.
It's hard to answer because there's so many different factors and so many different ways of looking at it. Luckily,
Mhm.
I've had the privilege of having experienced every part of it, which is a blessing to say the least.
Yeah.
But so I'll go through each one essentially. Like I grew up as a violist and a double bassist and a violinist, and
Mhm.
so there's all the whole rehearsal process of going to rehearsals, sectionals where like each member has their own little section and they all work on their own before they put it all together.
Mhm.
I've had the pleasure of conducting. For example, last year I conducted the Quebec Symphony.
Wow.
We did a concert at the Domaine Forget Academy of Music, and that was my first time ever conducting a major orchestra, and that was
Wow.
really 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 cool. And then through that I made connections to write pieces for orchestras around the world, and some of them are still in the works and some of them are being going to be played soon and stuff like this. So
Mhm.
it's cool. Like I'm working with a friend who conducts an orchestra in Greece. I'm working with a
Wow.
friend from Montreal, from Toronto. On top of that, as far as just music, because you were mentioning like chamber music, which is just groups of people. Like I'm writing for people in New York, in Chicago. I've had pieces played, all around North America. So it's like
Mm.
it's really cool going through the experience of each side of it. Because again, the whole analogy of a kid in a candy store, you're always feeling like there's something new to learn.
Yes.
The whole point of doing all this, right? You to learn, to grow, and to embrace.
Mhm.
Um, and as far as conducting, to answer your question regarding rehearsals, the conductor really has to understand the music inside and out. There's no
Wow.
questions, or buts, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
as a conductor, when I started a rehearsals or when I start studying for rehearsals, um, there's the score, which is the composer's all the notes and all the music together for all the instruments. The
Mhm.
conductor essentially understands that piece inside and out of his soul.
I
and
mean, he has to,
uh,
right? He has
right,
to.
right. And people say like, being a conductor, like it's just the simple movements, but of like being a metronome, but really the conductor is embracing the music, and those
Mm.
bodily movements create the energy which surrounds us, which then exploits a sound, giving you what the orchestra creates.
Wow.
So there's two of it. It's quite beautiful. The
Mm.
conductor has his own interpretation, but you can't control people, right? People have their own opinions on things. People have their own reactions to sound, reactions to
Mhm.
whatever. And so when you conduct, I've noticed that I have this exact image in my head of what I want, and I go to conduct, and what comes out could be a replica of that. But of course, the DNA is never going to be exact because there are people that are different. There are people that react differently.
Yes.
People react differently. And so I get something that's actually quite beautiful, and it's never the same exactly. Like, of
Mhm.
course, there's always, you work on stuff to make sure you do it exactly at the same time, at a certain type of sound, but it's never exactly the same,
Mhm.
right? To the milligram, right? And
Yeah.
that to me is quite beautiful. And that to me is also why a lot of people are missing concerts right now with COVID, because every concert is different. It's
It's
not the same
different.
thing as a recording,
Yep.
right? So recordings, you listen to the same one, you put repeat, it's the exact same thing. When you do a concert, you go to the same piece twice, they play it differently. Even
Mhm.
though it sounds kind of the same to the trained ear, it sounds different emotionally or whatever. Your brain, that's another thing we can talk about, like the whole psychology of music, where your brain takes you is different every
Yep.
time based off of
Yep.
your own state at that time, which is quite fascinating to me. So as far as rehearsing and stuff, it is really quite a lot of work.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
That's
Wow.
Yeah, but that's what we're trained to do, right? That's why we spend 20 years of our life studying this instrument so that we can do it professionally, because it is not easy, right?
Mhm.
And it's something that um, has made me respect musicians and artists of all forms, right? Because
Wow.
like there's never a simple way of doing an art form. There's always a
Mhm.
complexity to it. Um, whether it looks easy or not, there's always something complex about it. You just
Mhm.
don't know about
You
it.
just don't know
And
about it.
it's absolutely beautiful to experience in multiple different facets of my life. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's beautiful because what we see is the final product. It's the synchronized final art form. But what we don't see is the behind the scenes and the complex uh, effort that is put into trying to gel all these instruments and gel all these personalities of different people and different emotions and different backgrounds and different characteristics to finally get this one piece that is synced and in unison. We don't see the work that goes behind, which I really do appreciate. When people talk
Right,
about it, and I really do understand that it's not easy, but once it's done, it's absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely amazing.
right. And
I
but at the
mean,
end of the day, the last performance is as important as the process too. It really is,
yes, it
right? Like
is. I think
there is beauty in both.
there's definitely beauty in both, 100%. I mean, out of all the places you perform, I know you've done some solo performances, and I mean, a lot of solo performances, definitely in many different places I've seen on your Instagram as well. Out of all those performances you've done, to the best of your memory, what's the first one that comes to mind in terms of
Oh,
what is the best reaction that you've ever received after playing
well,
a piece?
depends. The reaction, I really enjoyed conducting Quebec Symphony, and that the reaction from people after that was wonderful. But
Mhm.
my personal favorite performance, because sometimes you just go for the performance, and you don't really talk to people after that, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
My favorite performance, I was with an orchestra, and we went to um, Leipzig and Berlin, and
Hmm.
we also went to Prague in Europe. And so we did this little like kind of mini tour of little concerts in like primary schools and also concert halls and stuff.
Hmm.
And my favorite one was when we were at Berlin, because one, it's Berlin,
It's
and
Berlin.
um, I've never been, and you grow up studying and appreciating so many composers, Beethoven,
Mhm.
Mozart, all from Germany, right? And
Yeah.
to be there, like I visited Bach's church, right?
Wow.
You know what I mean? And uh, you know, and Beethoven's home and all this other stuff. Like you visit these places and you're reliving this music, and then you go to perform it, and it's almost as cheesy and as weird as it sounds. There's like this spirit around you guiding you through it, and you
Wow.
feel something else. It's not the same.
It's
Um,
different.
it's a feeling I'll never be able to really explain or
Hmm.
re-experience, but that's again the beauty of it, right? And I'm happy I experienced that, and I'm happy I had the chance to live that and
Hmm.
to be able to share it today, right? But um, really, Berlin and Leipzig, those two were my favorite concerts in my career so far.
Wow, that's beautiful. I mean, you mentioned growing up and looking up to certain people and looking up to certain musicians, and I think the next question is more or less similar to that. It's, I mean, out of all the people you've worked with, out of all the conductors you've been able to work with, all the people in the music industry that you've been able to work with and meet and have the opportunity to speak to and work with, which one was your favorite? Which one individual stands out the most?
Well, in some ways, if I'm honest, I don't like that question because every person and every experience has its own value.
That's true.
And
That is
to
true.
put them in a hierarchy, I think is unfair to the people that
Mm,
aren't.
wow.
I cannot be where I am without meeting every single person I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
And you learn to be grateful in that sense,
Mhm.
growing up in this field, and again, absolutely beautiful. There are people, man. I've People say like, oh my gosh, like when you want to play for me, like if you want advice on a piece of music, like play for me, you know what I mean? And they're trained musicians, and I do. But at the same time, I've noticed the people who I play for who are not musically trained have the most to offer as far as
Wow.
response,
Wow.
because they don't know how to express it. Their facial features, their tone of voice, their pauses, and their speaking, their words of choice. It really brings out something else in you as a composer,
Yeah.
right? Or a performer. So to say that is unfair to everyone who's helped me become who I am today and who I will become, right? There's always a future. But as far as like a memorable experience, if I had to give one, I had the chance of studying with Alexander Shelley, who's the conductor here at NAC,
Mhm.
conducting for just a short period of time. But
Mhm.
although it was only 10 minutes and we were doing Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, it was the things I learned just by watching someone do their thing was absolutely incredible.
Wow.
And the other opportunity I had was Yoav Talmi from the Israel Philharmonic as well as the Quebec Symphony. He was the
Mhm.
conductor for there. I watched him rehearse with an incredibly famous violinist who's I can't believe I forget her name right now. I'm drawing a blank, but watching him, he's in his he's getting pretty old, so he's in his last days, and watching him conduct, maybe possibly one of his last concerts or whatever,
Mhm.
it was absolutely incredible. And I was in this concert hall watching him conduct the day after I actually did the concert, and I was in this audience, and he wrote a piece for um, the bassoonist in the orchestra. Their son passed away the week before the concert, so he wrote this
Wow.
piece in memory of the son, and they
Sure.
performed it, and the bassoon had no idea. The bassoonist had no idea, and they go and he gets the mic and he's like, "This is in memory of the son." And I'm sitting there, and as most guys don't like to admit it, I'm incredibly emotional. So
Wow.
I'm sitting there and I'm watching this piece, and I close my eyes I usually like to close my eyes when watching a concert rather than sitting there and staring at everyone.
Mhm.
It's more of a personal experience for me, but I close my eyes and I remember opening my eyes, the piece being done, and he did this pause at the end for 20 seconds. 20 seconds. He was 20 years old. 20 seconds. And I just sat there, and my heart was getting slower and slower and slower and slower. And when he stopped, I opened my eyes, and my button up jacket, whatever it's called, was filled with tears. It was
Wow.
completely drenched. And my friends, my colleagues, other conductors who conducted the orchestra with me that week were sitting next to me. They're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I was like, "That was absolutely phenomenal." And
Wow.
it's such an interesting field to be in, because you explain through sound the unexplainable, and
Mhm.
it's absolutely I cannot be more thankful to be in the fields that I'm in,
Mhm.
because if I don't feel something in this field, I go feel in this field, and so I'm always in this sense of thankfulness for being able to express in all these different mediums, and it really brings out a part of you that it's hard to bring out without
Mhm.
that. Is again very thankful for that.
Mhm. I mean, it's very interesting you mentioned, but I mean, music has this ability to invoke some kind of emotion in us. I don't know what it is about music, but it's some memories triggered or some emotions triggered, or I don't know what it
Well,
is that.
that's very interesting, because I haven't been writing it for a while, but I'm writing this book called Life as Perspective, and in it I did this like very simple, not detailed case study of my own, where I
Mhm.
went to there's this famous sonata that I not famous. I was playing a concert of the sonata, Bowen Sonata Number One,
Mhm.
and I loved this piece. No one knows it. I loved it, and I remember feeling again very emotional at this second movement, which was very slow and emotional and harmonious. And
Mhm.
I thought, okay, I need to see if other people get this reaction at this one section that I got.
Mhm.
So I go, okay. So I go to my friend. Of course, I'm not going to say her name, and I play her this 20-second piece and part of the piece, and then I say, I want you to write down feelings that come up to mind in chronological order. And she's like,
Mhm.
okay, can I listen to it twice? And I said, of course. So she listened to it once and she closed her eyes, and she listened to it a second time, and she wrote down these things. She wrote down happy, peaceful, calm, fun, embracing, stuff like this. And then I went to another friend who has never met Bronwyn in her life and doesn't know this piece at all either.
Yeah.
Okay. So I play her this 20-second piece, and I say, write down memories that come to mind that you have experienced. And she said, okay. And she writes down, last dinner with my dying grandfather, a walk next to the canal, uh, eating orange juice and a croissant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, what the hell? Like, what does this have to do with anything? You know what I mean? And I go and I sit down, I stare at these two pieces of paper. I am not joking. They went perfect with each other.
Wow.
So, the whole calm and love went with dying grandfather. The whole calm went with the walk. The whole fun went with the food, etc. And
Sure.
I noticed that, of course, this is pretty obvious, but the fact that I experienced this is a personal achievement for myself, where you have a personal response, and whatever medium you use to express that personal response is your own. And people have their own response to themselves, right? To their own responses. And so it's like, whether you hear a really tragic piece and you think of someone passing away, or you hear a tragic piece and you think of your girlfriend breaking up with you, right? It's the same initial emotional purpose, which is angst or whatever. How you are expressing that is your own, right? And that's why music and emotion, we always say that music expresses emotion. It doesn't go out of its way to say this emotion and that emotion and that. It gives you the purpose of a composer, which I've noticed when I started writing. You have to realize you use all these techniques and you study for years and you study for years and you study scores and you read and you read and you read simply to express your own meaning. Right?
It's so true.
And how you interpret that meaning is your own.
Yeah.
I've had times, man, where I wrote a piece, for example, for my girlfriend, and it was called an adagio for strings. And we were on a walk, and adagio means walking in pace. So you're on this walk, and she was like, Nawfel, you keep humming. And I was like, I know, I have this piece stuck in my head. She's like, go home and write it. And I said, okay. So I go home, I stayed up till 4 a.m. and I finished this piece. And I sent it to her, and she's like, that's gorgeous. 2 weeks later, an orchestra asks me to write a piece for them. So I send them this adagio, and they premiere it 2-3 months later in August.
Wow.
And
wow.
Yeah. So it gets premiered, and I bring my girlfriend over, and my girlfriend's mom comes over too, and we go to this concert. And after the concert, there's this has never happened to me before. There's this line of 10 people waiting to talk to me, and I'm sitting there like, who am I?
Right.
The fact that emotions have been brought to them by sound that I created just to express my own feelings for my brought people to experience something in themselves. And so this lady, I talked to all these people, different stories. Oh, I liked it. Some people just said, oh, I liked it. Some people, whatever. One person came up to me, and we ended up having a 25-minute conversation. And my girlfriend looked at her mom and said, don't worry, this happens every concert. We should just go. Yeah, I like to talk to people. So this guy comes over, and he said, I lost my dog a couple of months ago. And I was like, I'm so sorry for your loss. And he said, adagio, he's a trained musician apparently. He said, adagio means walking pace. To me, adagio meant my dog walking away from me.
Wow.
And I looked at him about to burst in tears, but I just said, like, I'm so sorry for your loss. Like, is there anything I could do? And he just looked at me. It was like a movie. He looked at me and he said, you've already done everything I needed. And I gave him a hug because it wasn't COVID.
Because it wasn't COVID.
I gave him a hug, and we laughed it out and we talked it out. And he said, you wrote this for your girlfriend, and I heard it for my dog. And
sure. That's deep.
I will never forget that moment. And he left, and I never met him again. But that memory completely sticks with me when I think about, what is the point of doing music? Well, that's the point of doing music, to help other people and to help yourself. And again, music explains the unexplainable, and I will never ever disagree with that.
It's crazy. You've literally just spoke about it, but briefly. My last question was going to be about the book, Life with Perspective. I was actually going to ask about that, so we can definitely talk about it a little bit more towards the end. But you made a post on your Instagram. I don't remember when, but it had a quote by William James. The quote goes a little bit like this: "The greatest discovery of our generation is that human beings can alter their lives but altering their attitudes on the mind. And then you said, every single thing we do, say, and think, whether subconsciously or consciously, comes from some sort of memory, experience, habit, influence, from social norms, persons, survival instinct, and opinion derived from all the above, you know? And I was like, I mean, I went through your Instagram and every single
I
one
can
of
see
your
that.
posts, I mean, like 90% of all your posts have some sort of valuable, you know, groundbreaking information. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, I don't know if people have come to you and told you that the work on your Instagram is a gold mine. It's literally a mind gold mine. It's absolutely
Thank you.
amazing, some of the things that you write in your posts. And I'm thinking, which book does he get this from? And then, but it's like, it literally just comes from your head. And it's beautiful to see that you think about these things, you know?
Well,
And I,
you have to. I can't. I have to give credit where credit is due. I don't want to say that I think of all these things because
Mhm.
that means that you know I am this person who knows everything. No, not at all. Okay,
yeah.
like I have very dear friends in my life who have made me who I am. I have
Mhm.
two friends in particular. Of course, I'm not going to say their name. Three friends actually, who, of course, I'm not going to say their name, but they have completely changed who I am.
Wow.
And um, they're artists too, they're poets too, they're painters. And I, since meeting them, I have never been the same. And
Wow.
one of my friends of these two, he reads like 200 books a year, and
That's a lot of books.
got me, yeah, and he got me into reading. He really got me into reading, and I met them maybe 2 years ago. And so 2 years ago, I've been reading a lot, except the past 6 months because of other stuff. But
Mhm.
I've been reading a lot. And all the stuff I'm reading is like philosophy, psychology, theology,
Mhm.
sociology, like all these things that make you think. And through doing that, I started writing. Like, what are my opinions on this?
Mhm.
What's a personal experience I've had that relates to this? And then I
Mhm.
expand on it. And
Mhm.
so I've learned about myself through, in some ways, reliving past experiences and explaining them to myself.
Wow.
And then rereading my explanations and being like, okay, if I was giving this advice to someone else, like this is how they reply, and then I reply as that other person, and then I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. And I analyze my responses to things, both quick time and long term.
Mhm.
And I notice changes in my personality, and I really do study them, and I really do make sure, like, I understand, like, how was I 6 months ago, and how am I today compared to that? In what ways? What changed that? Is it a series of events? Was there one critical event that made me think of this and that? And I really go into myself in that way.
Mhm.
And in some ways, man, I go through that through music and through art.
Wow.
And I have this little journal of mine where at first I was writing poetry. It's I've filled 3 of them by now. And I write my thoughts, and I create mind maps and get arthritis from how much I'm writing and stuff. And literally. And uh and some days, I wake up at like 5 a.m. and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this thing in my head. I have to let it out. There's tension
Mhm.
in my body. I have to let out. So I
Mhm.
go and I paint, and I realize it's like 3 p.m. and I've painted like 11 paintings, 10 paintings. You know what I
Wow.
mean? And so I go through these phases of absolutely intensity in a field.
Mhm.
And right now, I'm working a lot on jazz repertoire and piano and composing for people around the world. But
Mhm.
before that, I was in painting mode. In 2 months, I made 85 paintings.
85 in two
And
months,
85 paintings. Yeah,
bro.
because it shows you how much like I have to like express. I have to get this tension out of my
Mm.
body.
Mhm.
I have this thing in my head, and I have to explain it somehow.
Mhm.
And I create these pieces, and all these pieces mean something to someone else and stuff. And of course, they sell, which is also good. But the point is that it expresses something from myself that I didn't know I had,
Mm.
right? And so that's why I do what I do. But um, yeah, that's that.
That's actually beautiful. That's
Thank you.
absolutely amazing. And I mean, you also just mentioned that's why I do what you do. You also made another post a couple months back. I was really into your Instagram, my goodness. But it says,
Thank
when you play or do anything, it's an opportunity to show who you are. your morals, what type of person you are, whatever it is, shows every time you present yourself. That's both scary and beautiful, which is very true. And I mean, you've gotten yourself well versed in a lot of different creative spaces, in a lot of different forms, and a lot of separate timelines and everything. But I mean, something definitely has to remain true, and that's who you are, and that's what you believe in, and those are your morals. How do you how are you able to present that through every different form of art form that you're involved in? I mean, how you it must be difficult, right? Is it not?
Um, Difficulty is subjective. Um,
Okay.
so I would say as long as you're true to what you're trying to do, as far as your own self reflection, that's what matters.
Hmm.
Um, and that post, I remember I used to have a blog where I wrote a lot about performance anxiety and performance practice, and that was one of
Hmm.
the posts where I was a quote from there. And um, when it comes to performances, as far as showcasing who you are, in some ways it's true, in some ways it's not. And let me just expand on that. When you're
Okay.
performing a piece, you're expressing a piece of a composer.
Yeah.
You're expressing a part of them.
Hmm.
But how you do that is through yourself,
Wow.
right? And so let's say I'm playing a Schubert sonata, Franz
Hmm.
Schubert, and I'm playing this piece, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, Nawfel, are you emotional?" Well, no, Schubert was emotional, and I'm expressing I'm expressing that. So
That's
I
true.
have to relive that. I have to relive that experience.
Hmm.
Now, how I express it, a good musician, from my understanding and what people have said, this is very subjective again. How you express yourself is from reliving an experience or reliving that moment or simply just reflecting in the moment. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be, okay, now I'm thinking about this. Boom. No. Like,
That's not how it
that's not
works.
it. No, that's not it. It could be, but for everyone's different, right? I've
Hmm.
met musicians who are extremely technically versed, but have no emotional soul, and they play really fast, and people are they win competitions, but you meet them and you're like, wow, you've got nothing inside you,
Mm.
right? And then I've had people who, are incredibly emotional, not very good technically, and they play, and although some little things happen here and there, and they're playing, you can tell that like they love what they do, and they're there, and they're captivating, and they're promising, right?
Hmm.
So the balance is both being technically equipped, which is the whole math idea of like studying and practicing, which is
Yeah.
boring, and then the whole expression, which is taking something out of you, formulating it, and sharing it with the world. And
Wow.
that's performance. That's performance. Playing is, oh yeah, cool, I can play this at 300 BPM. Good for you. Here's a gold medal. Performance, seriously, performance is living,
Hmm.
experiencing, sharing, loving, caring, protecting, you know, all of those things. And that's something I learned from my dear professor, Professor Vandersloot, and also from my mother
Wow.
when I was young. So, um, yeah, it's music is not about how fast you can play, although that's a big part of it.
Hmm.
Being able to do that. But through being able to play fast, you think you be able to express stuff. Think of it this way: you, the more technique you have, the more colors you have in your palette,
Hmm.
right? Blue, yellow, different types of yellow. You have ombre, you have ochre, you've got cadmium yellow, you got light
Hmm.
hue, you got all this other stuff. And you look at a landscape. Okay, you look at an abstract piece, and okay, they've got red, black, yellow, green,
Hmm.
simple one. Okay? And you're like, okay, yeah, this is cool. And then you look at one that has all these little different lines, different strings, and different sections. They've got a blob of that, and they're mixing the two colors, and you get fades, and you get ins and outs. That's a performance.
Okay.
You have more in your palette. If
Hmm.
it's like also when I talk, just more examples for you. When I talk, if I have more language, more different, metaphors to use, ways of explaining, all this other stuff, you have a better understanding of what I'm trying to say.
Hmm.
But if I have a small amount of language, say I'm speaking for 2 years, you won't get as much of the emotional depth and the intention behind my speaking.
Mm.
Now that's from language. With performance,
Wow.
it's the same thing. If you have this inner soul and you have this emotional integrity, that is your palette. and that comes from your technique as well. So it's a balance of both. And a lot of people focus a lot too much on the technique, but there's two sides of it. And I don't think people spend enough time with their emotions and with themselves.
Wow. So I think what I'm getting from that is definitely that having the talent and the capability is one thing, but there's so much that has to happen internally as well, mentally and emotionally, that needs to be presented in that performance or in that art to actually help people connect with it a little bit better, you know?
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
And you also have no idea what the audience member is going through. You have no idea, right? That's another thing, right? Like the whole dog experience, the guy who had his dog walking away. I had no idea. Right? Like people interpret sound as their own thing. People are looking into abstract expressionism and all these new pieces of music that a lot of people don't like. You know, it's like a singular note. That singular note could cause a lot of peace to someone.
Wow.
Right? So you can't discriminate music just the fact that you don't like it. It means something to someone.
It does.
That's all that matters. That's all.
It does. It does. It's absolutely beautiful. I listened to your album Home. It was beautiful. I listened to entire 30 minutes of it and it was absolutely beautiful. My personal favorite is the piano. So I easily fell in love with it and it was a no-brainer for me. But the question from that is, are there more albums to come? Should we expect more of something like that in the future?
Yeah, of course. 1,000%.
1,000%.
But to talk about Home a little bit, that whole album was improvised.
I saw that. I realized you put it in the post.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the reason is improvised. I was going through stuff in myself and I wanted to find home. I wanted to find my own. So I was going through these pieces, and if you listen to the album, there's a lot of dark pieces.
Yep, there is.
Very calm pieces and moving pieces. And in that album, I was finding my own home. And by the time I finished it, I recorded 35, 30 tracks, something like that. And I picked maybe, I think it was 8 or 10. And that's when I really realized all this stuff about, you know, I am my own self and I'm living my own life. Now, as far as albums to come, things I'm working on. I'm working with a friend from Winnipeg on a solo cello album. So I'm composing some cello music for him, and he's incredibly well known. If you want to check him out, his name is David Liam Roberts.
Okay.
He premiered A Piece of Mind in Winnipeg, which I can share the link to if you'd like. And he's absolutely phenomenal. And me and him have gotten along quite well the past few months because I knew of him 2-3 years ago, and I've been following his Instagram stuff, and we got along really well. He's performed at orchestras around the world.
Wow.
His sister is a good friend of mine. And so me and him have decided for me to compose, you know, a sonata, a couple solo pieces, and then he's going to record them from Winnipeg.
I am excited for that.
Yeah. I'm also been writing a lot of solo piano jazz, so I'm going to do a solo piano jazz album. I'm also working with a brass quintet. We're going to have some brass quintet music, and I'm also working with chamber musicians around the world to do an album there. And lastly, there's a lot going on. And lastly, I'm doing an album called might not be called this, but Nawfel and Friends, where I connect with people around the world. And the work that we put together, I put one of those tracks on the album. So, for example, I'm working with a jazz singer. We're writing a song right now. David's piece is going to be on there. I have a friend named Michael from a band called Blank Notion. We're writing a song right now.
Wow.
I'm working with a jazz saxophonist, Angelo Leo. You interviewed him.
Yes.
Me and him are working on our own album as well as a song being on my album.
I'm so excited. So much content.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of musicians, and it's all around the world. Just me and my connections that I've made, and there's going to be a series of albums. I hope the more people I connect with through my life.
Wow, that just shifts my entire plan in terms of questions. But I have to ask. I definitely have to ask. What value do you see in collaborations? I know I'm one who's a big advocate for collaborating and getting to network with other creatives and learn from them and work with them. What value do you see in collaborating? What does collaborating mean to you?
what value do you see in making friends? You learn a
Wow.
lot about yourself.
Hmm.
You learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about others and how they cope and how they respond, how they reflect. And I was watching your interview with Angelo, and you asked this question too, and he was talking a lot about learning about other people and how they play and how they respond.
Yes.
In some senses, I agree, but in other senses, you also have to understand that like you play for yourself in some ways to reflect, to experience, and you
Hmm.
also play for others for them to reflect and experience. So when I meet
Mm.
other people, it's all about learning, it's all about connecting, it's all about creating something new. Like I've met people who I've collaborated with, and I didn't know a single style of music from them, and then I started working with them, and it's one of my main sources now. So it's like,
Wow.
I worked with someone where he played me something from jazz, and now, of course, with my friend who I talked to, he's a big jazz person. I'm writing jazz music, and I've
Mm.
never expected this to be like 60% of what I'm doing now, right? So it's
Wow.
you learn things about yourself and you create new interests and you learn new things. I'm also working with a pianist right now. His name's Stephen Eckert, and they and I are planning a tour in
Ooh.
the next year after COVID's over. We're planning
After
a tour.
COVID.
Yeah, after COVID, of course, yes. And Stephen is really into um, atonal, post-atonal music, which I've never been into. I've always been like romantic, like lovey-dovey stuff,
Hmm.
and they're into atonal expressionism and very aggressive, different types of music. And so
Wow.
me and them are going to be playing some new pieces that I've never played before, and they've
Mm.
really opened eyes to new types of music. So like that's why we collaborate, to learn about ourselves.
Wow. That's I love collaboration. I'm a big fan, and I mean, you mentioned it already. I've asked this question before to probably 50% of the people that I've interviewed because it's
Yeah.
something that I really feel strongly on. I just like to hear what people think about. I'm going to move on to our last question now, and I think thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. I've learned so much from you. It's so different to see someone on their Instagram performing and their posts, but it's so much more better to meet them and actually have a conversation with them. So I really do appreciate this, and I do hope we can do this again. And better yet, probably even meet sometime uh, in real life. It would be so nice to meet you and work with you on something if possible. But the last question is on your book. You said something once. You said it's not always what you do or how you do it. Sometimes it's how you think you will do that changes the game, which I found to be such a profound statement. So it's before you even do what you do or decide what you do, it's what's in your mind. It's your perspective on this thing that changes the entire outcome of this thing. And in relation to your book, Life with Perspective, tell me more about that.
So that actually was from a chapter I was writing on intention,
Mm-hmm.
and our intentions on things reflect sometimes, of course, this is all very subjective,
Mm-hmm.
um, reflect on where we are at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if you do something, you can reflect back and you realize, okay, like what was my intention in that? And then through that intention, you realize, oh my gosh, like this is what was going on with me and I had no idea. And then
Mm-hmm.
you think about how did I affect them and how does that affect me knowing that I affected them that way? You go through this
Wow.
cycle. And that's the whole self-reflection thing.
Mm-hmm.
As far as books, I've I'm working right now on a couple poetry books, and I also actually, funny enough, released a self-published book called A Guide to Boyfriends. So I'm starting this series. I'll answer your question on my book soon, but I started this series where I do this like really funny compilation of like little uh, what not to do if you're a boyfriend, and then it'll be like what not to do if you're in first year, and I'm gonna do this whole series.
I
And then
love that. That sounds so
I'll send
cool.
you a link to that too.
That
Yeah, it's
sounds
funny.
so cool.
And then I also have multiple books of poetry that I'm waiting to publish, four to be exact.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so this book, Life is Perspective, the whole point of it is to, at first, it was from my blog, and it was to reflect on myself on where I was in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and how where you are, your surroundings affects your interpretation of what you're doing to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start realizing, well, how I think I'm treating other people is different to how people think I'm treating them, right? And then you
Wow.
go through this whole opinion process of like, being a little confused
Wow.
and learning about that, and
Mhm.
how there is no set grounds or basis to who you think you are. Like, people have opinions, and there's that whole theory of like, the whole saying of, you may think that you're friends with someone, but they could hate your guts.
That's so
Right?
true.
And you have no idea. You have no
Mm.
idea. So I've met people a lot in my life who, like, I think I'm friends with, but at the end of the day, I find out that they don't like me, and that's fine, right? So learn to accept that and be the best person that you are today. As far as the
Mm.
book goes, I'm working on it to reflect on myself, and in it, I'm going to be talking a lot about um, your own opinion on yourself, how that creates your own, response to certain activities. How you
Yep.
treat people could also be based on how you think of yourself too. How you were told um, about, like, if someone says, like, oh, if someone calls you fat in your life, for example, and then
Mhm.
you think a response about yourself later in the future.
Yeah.
You realize that you could have a self-harming factor in how you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And that goes into the whole idea of depression and all the whole psychological
Yeah.
aspects
Yeah.
with anxiety. So there's always intention with everything we do and say, and what we hear too, and how we interpret. And that's something I'm going to be talking a lot about in the book. Using personal experiences, some may be too personal, and also experiences I've learned from other people, and things I've learned from other people I've interviewed for my podcast. And
Mhm.
Again, the whole idea of collaboration and making friends and learning things from other people teaches you a lot more about yourself than you think. And
Wow.
learning to learn yourself comes from perspective, and that's the
Mhm.
whole point of the book.
Wow. I'm excited for it. I've been reading a lot about it, seeing a lot about it um, on your Instagram and things like that. I don't know. You said you haven't been writing it for a while now, but no pressure. Take your time. I think that's one thing. I think with any piece of art, actually, it's good to take your time. It's good not to rush it and not to force something. Otherwise, you really spoil how it's supposed to be. So being patient, taking your time, I think for me is something that's very important when it comes to creativity and art and anything in
You
general,
should never
really.
force yourself. Yeah, you should never force yourself to do something. It has to come from a good place. And if you do force yourself to do something, then your intention is to get it done. And at the end of the day, if your intention is just to get it done, you shouldn't be doing it. And so, if your intention is to help people and to share and to express and talk about music and art,
Mhm.
then that's your intention. But if your intention is to make $1,000 just by making this thing, then that's your intention. You have to live with that.
Mm.
But you have to make sense of that. That's my intention, and that's why I'm doing it. Now, people say there's a whole double negative thing that people do. Sorry, opposite thing that people do, where they're like, okay, I want to express, but I also want to make like $30,000. Well, you can
Bro.
approach it. You could do both. Like, I've sold paintings for quite a bit of money.
Mm.
You can do both, but at the same time, you also have to reflect on why you're doing it. Like, I did this painting to reflect on me at that time. Okay, that reflection is done. Okay, we'll sell it for whatever, $6,000, $7,000. But you have to. That might not be the best example, but you have to really reflect on your intentions and how that affects other people.
Wow. Yeah, I was actually going to ask that question. It's something that you've mentioned about understanding where you are and what state you're in, and not being in a state where you think you need to be somewhere where you're not supposed to be, and then trying to force this sort of false growth in yourself that's not really there, and just sort of accepting, okay, this is where I'm at in my journey. This is where I need to be. I'm going to pace through it, and I'm not going to force, being somewhere where I'm not. But I mean, it's difficult. It's definitely something that's difficult, especially uh, being in a creative space where everyone around you seems to be progressing, but you're not. Like, how do you deal with having everyone in the creative community doing so well, and then you're sort of feeling stuck in this one space?
Okay, a lot of things there. My friend has a saying that she says to me on a regular basis, and it's, everyone is on their own path.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me has completely changed how I approach every situation, because you're on your own path. You're not Joe Blow, you're not David, you're Nawfel. That's what you do. That's who you are, right? And so when I'm I've had many times, all the time, dude, with all these different fields, all the time, where you're like, oh my gosh, this person's 22 and did this and making this amount of money. Okay, great, good for them. How did they do it? This is the process I go through. How did they do it? What did they do? How much training? What type of training? Ask them questions. Learn about them. Learn about them, how they approach things. And through that, you're like, okay, cool. Like, do I see that in myself? Does that make sense in myself? Do I need to change something about myself? Is there something about myself that doesn't make sense? That's actually quite dysfunctional. You go that route. And I have students. I'm teaching over 18, 19 students right now, and through that, you get a lot of students who are like, oh, I'm never gonna make it. I'm never gonna make it into this orchestra. I'm never gonna get into the orchestra. Blah blah blah. Okay, well, if you say you're not going to, you're definitely not going.
Not going to. Yeah. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Now, I have many students who go through, anxiety, depression, all this other stuff, and we're talking, and I tell them, okay, let's meditate on it. Let's just experience. Let's live it. So when we start playing, we start talking about connecting with the body. We start talking about all this other stuff, cheesy as it is, and then we go to, what's your goal? What's your goal? What do you want to do? Oh, I want to get into this orchestra. What do you need to do to get into this orchestra? Okay, cool. You need to have a scale, you need to have a piece, you need to have this, and you have to do that. Okay. So what should we do to get that? Emotions aside. Of course, there are emotions involved. But if emotions was on a slide and you were a black and white person, what should you do? Okay, well, I should practice this and I should do that. Okay, cool. Now, life's not that easy.
It's not. It's not. It's not.
What do? You have to realize that it's not always 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
Right? 1 + 1 = 2. Then you take half of that, you times it by 3, and then you take away 1, and you go, right?
Right? It's funny.
That's essentially it, right? It's you should never. Okay, you talked about something about expectations, and you also talked about making goals. So if you're making a goal, what's realistic, what's not? My prof always told me, go for something that's harder, and if you don't get it, that's fine. And if you don't get what's easy, that's fine too, right? But you tried. That's important. And you learn things about yourself by trying, right? Do you know how many times I've been rejected on things? It's insane, right? But you learn to realize that, again, I'm not this whiz. I'm not this person who's been through so much and all that. I'm just someone who's accepting of the fact of where I am right now.
Yep.
And goals, and people talk to me and they're like, oh my gosh, Nawfel, you're gonna be famous, yada yada yada. At the end of the day, what do I need as far as me as a person? This is what my friend says all the time. What do I need? I need to love. I need to feel love. No, I don't need to feel love. I need to love. I need to experience. I need to admire. And I need to appreciate. Right? Now, it's funny how those are all A's.
Except for love.
So yeah. So I need those things. Now, anything on top of that, of course, I need enough food to survive, and I need enough money to not stress about surviving. Anything on top of that, there's a reason I'm going here. Anything on top of that is extra.
Yeah.
Right? And if you don't have that extra, you're as happy as if you had that extra. And people get greedy. They live off of $2,000 a month or whatever, and then they get $7,000 a month. They're like, whoa, look at all these things I can do. Great, good for you. Go live it, do it. And then they go back to $2,000 and they hit themselves.
And they're sad. And they hit rock bottom like it's crazy.
Well, do you need the 7,000? No, you don't. You need 2,000. So if I had 2001, I'd be as grateful as if I had 2,000.
2,000.
Right? If I had 9,000, I'd be as grateful as 2,000. But of course, it's better to have more money. Of course, don't get me wrong. But the principle of what I'm saying is, you have what you need. You're grateful for what you need, and anything extra is extra, and be thankful for that. Don't expect it to be there forever, because it won't. It might, but if it doesn't, that's fine.
Don't let it define you. Don't let it define you.
Right. So when you're going through these things, you really learn to just, okay, I got rejected. Okay, why did they reject me? You can ask them, why, what's going on? Like, does something happen? Like, what are your thoughts? Oh, this. Okay, cool. Good to know. All right. Don't be like, oh my gosh, why would you do this to me? Yeah, but don't get defensive. Okay, great. That's your opinion. I thank you for me that. And now I learned it in myself. Then you're aware of it in the future, right? You learn something about yourself. Good. You know what I mean? There's always another way of looking at it, right? I have friends, man, who they don't have a lot of money and they are the nicest, most caring people I've ever met. You know what I mean? And you don't need, you need enough to survive and you need to be thankful and all this other stuff. But you don't need enough to show off and all. You know? And so anything extra is extra. That's why you're using the word extra. Right?
Yeah.
So it just that's where I'm going.
Wow. Yeah, I find that to be like such a crazy thing. And I mean, like you mentioned, it's not a bad thing. Like having money is not a bad thing. But I do realize that I think even for myself, sometimes it's very easy to let it define me. It's very easy to let it define your art as well. And I will be honest, it does mess it up. Like the genuineness of your work and it's, I don't know, it's just so different from when you do it because you love it and you enjoy it. But when it's driven by certain things, but like you mentioned, again, I emphasize, not that it's a bad thing. It just doesn't feel the same. I don't know if that makes sense.
Again, the things that we're saying doesn't apply to every situation.
Yeah.
But it could be a basis for your response patterns for you to think about. It doesn't mean that this is exactly how it's going to be all the time. And if you don't do this, then no, people take my word sometimes way too exact. No, like for this situation that we're talking about in our conversation, and things change. Sometimes you do need to stress. Sometimes you do need to whatever, but not stress. Sorry, sometimes you do need to worry. That's normal. But that creates, as long as you act on it and you fix a problem, not just sulk all day for whatever. But again, that goes into our discussion on anxiety and depression, and we can talk about that for hours.
Wow. No, thank you so much. I really do appreciate this conversation. I really enjoy it. I got more out of it than I thought I would. And I hope that the people that are going to watch this are going to, get the same out of it as well. I really do appreciate this time.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been super special. I think, I don't know what's in me that's saying I should have you again in the second season. If there is a second season of this show, which I'm planning to start off next year. If you don't mind, it would be really awesome to get you back on.
It would be an honor.
It would be really awesome to get you back on and see how things are going. I'd really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome.